Hello and welcome back to Pop Culture Graveyard. I am Hollis. With me as always is Dave. Hello, Dave.
Hello, Hollis.
You're not going to tell us about the fit today?
Oh, that's what I'm talking about.
You're looking very good. Oh, Surf Cuba
I'm
t-shirt.
wearing Surf Cuba, which is a film that my girl Chrissy worked on. You can watch it. I think it's on Vimeo. Cuba wasn't getting any surf love, even though they had a small surf culture.
Mm-hmm.
I wore it because it was the closest thing I had to something I thought McConaughey would wear.
All right. I'm rocking the Elliot Gould old school t-shirt.
Good looking shirt. Who made that?
That is a Dave T. Ask for it by name. Check the link below. It's one of my favorite shirts you've ever made, Dave. It's old schooled. And at the time of this film that we're doing today, Elliot Gould was a big Hollywood star. Today we are doing the 1993 high school comedy, Dazed and Confused.
Yesterday, I realized that the title of the movie is the same title as a Zeppelin song.
Wow. I can always count on you for the hot take.
My specialty is cold takes.
That's true. One of the reasons for choosing this film is because it's set on the last day of school, which is May 28th, 1976. So I wanted this episode to drop as close to the date of May 28th as possible. We're a few days early, but it is right around when the kids will be getting out in certain states. But also I wanted to do this film because we have been showing a lot of love to an awful lot of modern high school films. I'll tell you something. I believe that this film, Dazed and Confused, is like the big bang of high school movies. It spawned so many others. Most filmmakers today have never even seen American Graffiti and don't go back that far. But Richard Linklater, who did this film, is very much a modern filmmaker. And this film, even though it depicts the 70s and is made in the 90s, it still has a very modern sensibility. It speaks to an awful lot of the films that we've been covering.
Yeah, absolutely. On its surface, it looks like, oh, that's that movie where everybody's drinking and getting high. And it's mostly about drinking and getting high, right? And it's like, yeah, no, it's pretty deep. It's and you might say like, oh, it's not that deep. It's just kids realizing that they're heading out in the world. And I'm like, yeah, but for those kids, that's heavy, man.
It really is.
Nothing in the film happens because someone's high or because someone is drunk. There's no result of the drinking or as a result of the smoking weed, which I think is great because 99 out of 100 times, especially with weed, there is no result.
No. If anything, there's inaction.
Yeah.
Talking about doing something. That's my big problem with people talking about, and I guess that's why it's finally become decriminalized in so many states, people talking about marijuana as a gateway drug. You know what marijuana is a gateway to? Cheese doodles.
Yeah, I was going to say, ice cream, brownies.
Yeah, and as someone who had his life go off the rails for a while due to harder drugs, I have always looked down on pot. I used to when I was doing the harder stuff. But just looked upon marijuana as something like quaint and something that only my most peaceful burnout friends did. I've never been like, oh, watch out for that guy. He's on marijuana. Like that's never, there's no one raging, beating people up because he's high on marijuana. So one thing I want to get right off the bat is ask you, because I know that you're a car guy. Is this the best car movie we've done so far?
It's up there. It's up there. It doesn't do car porn. It doesn't.
I was just going to use that phrase. Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't do car porn. Probably the best shot is Wooderson pulling into the parking lot in his Chevelle. It's a beautiful Chevelle. For a long time, Chevelle was the one that I was like, when I get a car, it's going to be a Chevelle.
The opening is Pickford's car. It's the 69 Pontiac GTO, the Judge.
Yeah. So the opener is the GTO. That's a little car porn in that it's like taking its lap.
Slow motion to sweet emotion.
Yeah.
Oh, gorgeous.
Then Wooderson's car gets a slow walk. His black and gray Chevelle.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the two like hey, look at these car shots. The rest is sort of like, these cars happen to be here. This truck happens to be here, but they're great. There's parking lots full of cars, and you can pause it and be like, wow, that's a lot of nice cars.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
something too. I mean, when you look at this film, you can see it didn't have a massive budget. And
mhm.
so it is fantastic. All those like parking lot shots and elsewhere. The one thing that they did not scrimp on is the cars. There are so many classic, gorgeous cars
Well,
and
what
even like trucks.
you call whatever the local classic car group is, or
Hmm.
within a couple of towns, and they all come running. That's like their
Yeah,
favorite thing. They get the phone call. They're like, you're like, bring all your classic cars down. Some of them keep them movie ready. Like they won't put any stickers on. They won't put any
right.
like ready to be shot. I don't know if it's a Linklater thing that he's like, he's not paying a lot of actors a lot. He's not paying a lot to actors in this movie
Yeah, they're getting
because
scale because they're all young.
yeah, hard to believe, but at the time, these are all essentially nobodies.
Right.
And it's a pretty good list of nobodies that are no longer nobodies.
It is a stellar cast. We're going to get
Yeah.
into the cast. One last thing on the car
Yeah.
front, though. The Judge is my favorite car in the movie. It's driven by Pickford. The Judge, I did a little research. The Judge cost $3,313 new
Yeah.
out of the showroom in 1969, which is
Yeah.
over $28,000 today. By 1976, I could believe Pickford got a good deal on it with his pot dealer earnings.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
You know, he comes from money too. We see his house later and his parents.
Mm.
And that's great too. I see his parents packing the car to go away. I like to imagine they're driving all the way up to like Lake Geneva to the Playboy Hotel and Spa to
His
spend the
dad,
weekend.
his dad is like Dan Tana. He's like,
Oh, great.
oh,
Yeah.
so good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know what? And he's not bad. He's not a bad dad. Not
He's
violent.
not. No.
He's not, he doesn't yell. He's just like,
No.
nope.
He
He's just
doesn't
like,
have to.
nope.
He's the
Yeah.
classic. My dad was this way. He's a classic enforcer. He's big. He's tall. He's heavy set. He can do with words what other people have to do with their
Right.
fists.
It's like, how hard does your dad hit you? Never pushed him far enough to find out.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
So yeah, one last car thing. It is, you're absolutely right. It could get gratuitous and it could go full car porn, and it doesn't. It doesn't have to because they're just gorgeous and everywhere. But there's one scene where Wooderson is talking to the bully character, Clint, played by Nicky Katt. He's resting his hands on the hood.
Oh yeah, the Edelbrock manifold,
Edelbrock
board over.
intakes, yeah, all that great
Yeah.
stuff, all the jargon. But do you know what Wooderson has nicknamed his car?
I don't remember.
He says it really quick. He says, "Let me tell you what Melba Toast is packing."
That's right. Yeah. I didn't realize he was saying that to, what's that guy's name?
Clint?
Clint. He's like the one scary guy, well, second scary guy in the movie.
Yeah, he is. So every young actor everywhere was in this movie. There were so many promising young actors in this film, and no one at the time knew which one would pop. So it's crazy to see which ones became big, because I would have bet money that the guy playing Wooderson would have done a few more creepy old guy roles and then
Yeah.
gone straight to video. And like Affleck would have been the bully and a couple of other things. Instead, they
Totally.
became the biggest stars on the planet.
Yeah, it really is surprising. You would think they would be the ones who were pigeonholed after that. It speaks to their decision making, or, because, there may have been offers. We got this great thing. It's Wooderson-esque, you're like a stoner. And maybe he's like, nah, I'm going to move on from some of that.
That's great. I didn't even think of that. It's true.
I mean,
They had people looking out for them at least.
yeah, maybe Matt Damon was like, I don't know, Ben, do you really want to be a bully in every movie?
And also, of course, Renee Zellweger, who wears that striped shirt and is so like fetching for 2 seconds at a time. She's one of the girls, one of the cheerleaders that's giving the other cheerleaders a hard time. But it's a blink and you'll miss it role. And
Yeah.
in the book that I was telling you about, All Right, All Right, All Right, the oral history of Dazed and Confused, every guy on this shoot had a crush on Renee Zellweger. So it's crazy that the three kind of bit parts, if you can even call Zellweger a bit part, but It's crazy that they became super successful. And Jason London, I would have picked him for the big star.
Yeah, I mean, that's the queued up guy. He's queued up. He's like,
Hmm.
okay, launch me. I'm ready. You know what I always like to say when someone doesn't get huge is like, maybe they decided not to.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you
Yeah.
give them power over
Yeah.
whether they got big or not. That's awesome.
Yeah. I think it first came up in Friday the 13th because somebody had some nepotism that could have driven them to the top. I
Bing
forget who it
Crosby's
was.
son.
That's what it was. Yeah, that's what it was.
Ben Affleck plays the bully O'Banion. He's great in it. He was not a household name yet. We already talked about Wooderson, Matthew McConaughey, who got the part basically by chatting with Richard Linklater in a bar for
In
like
a bar. Yeah.
hours. He knew everything about cars. He loved girls. He is Wooderson. We have the lead, who was Jason London, as Randall Pink Floyd, the quarterback of his high school team, who doesn't know if he wants to play next year.
Not a particularly creative nickname, and it wouldn't have been. This
It
is high
wouldn't have
school.
been.
Yeah.
Plus, it's high school in 1976. Every single person, including Pickford, when we go for a pot buy earlier, has the Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon poster in their bedroom.
Yeah.
It is the obvious nickname. There is Joey Lauren Adams, who would be in so many Kevin Smith films. She plays Simone, Randall's occasional, when he feels like it, girlfriend. Mila Jovovich, who
I
was
know. Yeah,
practically a
that was
supermodel at the time, young and gorgeous. She would be in the reboot of Blue Lagoon, I believe.
yeah, oh yeah, she was in like the revisit of what was it? Return to Blue Lagoon, I
Return to
think.
Blue Lagoon.
Yeah, and for me, she's Fifth Element.
Fifth
Yeah,
Element, of course, is
yeah,
probably
yeah.
her best work. But she did all of those movies that I really enjoyed. The
Oh,
what
the
are the
video game movies, those were fantastic.
they're so much fun. Resident Evil.
Resident Evil. I tried to play Resident Evil once. Couldn't get out of the first room. Like it was one of those games where you had to like walk around and be like, does this do anything? Does this do anything?
You mean like Wizard of Gore? I was an Atari 2600 kid when my parents could
Yeah.
finally afford
Ooh,
it. So,
2600.
yeah.
Fancy. Keep going. Jovovich. Keep going.
Jovovich, we mentioned pot smoking. There's one character that embodies the love of marijuana more than any other. And it is Rory Cochrane's character of Slater. His first name is Ron Slater. We never hear it, but he is your typical burnout. He is red-eyed through the whole thing. He talks sluggishly and goes on all these trivial talking jags.
His catchphrase is essentially, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
That's what and he just uses it like an exclamation. Like, are you
Yeah.
going to be there? That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
That's
it's
what I'm
great.
talking about.
He's so lovable.
He's
And
terrific.
as proof that he's so lovable, he, much like Randall Pink Floyd, those two characters stride two different worlds in high school. They're friends with the geeks, they're friends with the burnouts, they're friends with the athletes even.
It's the beauty of both of those guys is they're the crossover guys. And I knew those guys.
Mhm.
I was similarly democratic in that I was friends with no one until I became a greaser.
Right.
And then and then was friends with the greaser. I was friendly with other groups and stuff, but there were people who were just liquid, just fluid.
Mhm.
Could and Pink Floyd. What's the first name?
Randall.
Randall
Randy.
Pink Floyd. If that was your nickname back then, that's the coolest nickname ever.
Like he
Like,
needed something else to make him cool.
I know. He's gorgeous.
He's gorgeous.
He's
Yeah.
nice. He's got great hair. He's an excellent
A
quarterback.
star quarterback. Yeah.
Yeah.
Looking tough.
Yeah. And it's also good. It's good that he was multifaceted, click wise, and that Slater is great because Slater doesn't have the handsomeness, doesn't have he's not as cool and like quick talking and
Mhm.
but he's doing it too. Slater is someone you can get high with, so he's getting high
Yeah.
with all the groups.
Yeah. I was just going to say, someone like Slater, usually if he hangs out with athletes, they keep him around sort of like a court jester. but he's never one of them. But there's a scene, he's in the car many times with the athletes, and he gives as good as he gets. And him and Donnie go back and forth, like insulting each other. Even O'Banion, who, you know, you would think would like slam Slater to the ground if his friends weren't around. You don't get that from him, even though it's like, hey man, we just banged your mother. Like Slater's like, all right, fuck you, dickhead. Like there's no repercussions. So Slater's in with them.
Yeah, Slater's tight. There was a moment towards the end of high school where I knew a friend's parents were away, and we knew we were going to be hanging at his house, drinking beers and getting high. And I went and I walk in the living room, and sitting on the chair in the living room is Itchy Man, who's the football guy. And I said, Brendan, can I talk to you? What is this guy doing here? He was like, dude, he has amazing plot. And I was like, let's go look into it.
Yeah. The great equalizer.
It was an actual equalizer. It actually brought a lot of people together. And then once I started selling it, forget about it.
Oh yeah. Everybody loves you when you're holding. So let's just fly through more of these people.
Keep going.
Adam Goldberg, who would later be in everything from Friends to Saving Private Ryan and onward. His wig is terrible, Dave. Is that what you mean by great hair? Easy to make fun of? Yeah, it is really bad.
Yeah, it's a wig. But I think it looks amazing. I think it looks amazing.
I also think they did the right thing. They didn't give him gorgeous hair. They gave him a wig of like, if he did grow it out, that's all he could muster probably.
Right.
Anthony Rapp, a.k.a. Tony, he would be one of the leads in Rent on Broadway. And on the Cast album, he's one of the original leads. To get a guy like that.
I saw footage of Linklater saying, that guy was the most accomplished guy we had. That guy showed up. He knew all of his lines. He said, oh, it's a shame you learned all those lines. We're probably going to change a lot of them.
Yeah, no, I could believe he's that responsible. Sasha Jensen, who I never saw before or after, played Donnie. He's in the overalls a lot, and he's like Randall Pink's friend, where he's like, Donnie, we'd do just as good if we were in a band or something. He's kind of his right arm.
He looks like one of the roller skating guys from the Warriors.
Yeah, one of the punks.
He looks like a punk. Yeah. He looks like a punk. He's got fluffy eyebrows.
He does.
He's weird. He's weird and good. He's weird and good. There were weird kids like that.
Yeah. There is Michelle Burke, who was later in The Coneheads, a movie that I really like, that I feel is underrated as a comedy. Yeah. Cole Hauser, Wings Hauser's kid, plays Benny, who drives the pickup truck with Jim Dandy blasting by Black Oak, Arkansas, which had a front man that David Lee Roth ripped off a lot of moves from, by the way.
Oh.
I already mentioned Ben Affleck as O'Banion, who's the school bully who is repeating like his third year as a senior or something. So he's just not smart. Parker Posey, the indie queen herself, is fantastic in this. A bully of a different type. She's head of the cheerleaders.
You know who she played recently?
Who's that?
The doctor from Lost in Space.
Dr. Smith?
She played Dr. Smith.
I love that they made him a woman for this.
Yeah,
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Wow. I have to see that.
I don't know that it's something you'll like, but she's terrific in it. And she walks this line. She's 100% self. Like everything she does is for herself. Not unlike Dr. Smith. She doesn't have the cowardice that Dr. Smith has.
Right. But that's outdated anyway.
Yeah, it is.
That was two-dimensional.
She like walks the line between self-preservation and occasionally having a heart. She's a great character. I like her. I once made a business card for her dog.
Wow. That's exactly what I could see a Parker Posey character in an indie film having done.
Chrissy was working for her in some way when this whole thing happened. There was an inside joke or a party.
Right.
And said, "Can you whip up a business?" Sure.
Oh, yeah. I love it. Nikki Katt plays the bully, Clint. Adam Goldberg's character, when he gets pushed around by Clint, says something like, something monkey motherfucker in a 50s greaser uniform.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. This is when he's talking about him and he's not around. I really like what Goldberg did. Mike's reaction to that was a slow burn. But it was a really important high school thing that because they were like the intellectuals, him and his two friends. I thought it was a big deal that Mike, he simmered for a little while.
He simmered
Yeah.
while he drank.
Yeah, he simmered while he drank, and he started to think, and he started to say, if I don't do something, I'm going to go through the rest of my life feeling like, like I didn't stand up for myself, and it'll haunt me.
There's a humiliation that's going to set in for fucking ever.
It's a beautiful realization that I'm sure a lot of guys wish they had. And his whole theory works. He's like, I'm going to go over there, I'm going to get a shot in, and I'm going to hang in until they break it up. They'll break it up. They always break up these things.
Right. They don't break it up as quickly as he had hoped.
No. It goes longer than he had hoped.
Right.
But he got a good shot in.
Yeah.
And he's fine afterwards.
I would not advocate violence for kids, but I will say this. The stakes of a fight or standing up for yourself are never going to be lower than they are while you're a child.
Mm-hmm.
Now, these guys are a little older, but like if there's a bully, like what's the worst that can happen a lot of times is just you take a few licks and then you may become friends with this person. But if you don't stand up for yourself, that bully goes off and lives his best life or her best life. The people who are left with the scars don't always get over it, So it's a good scene to show because they showed a broad spectrum of the high school experience.
Yeah, and they showed it well. And I know that it's 10 years before my high school experience. It's happening I think I'm 9 years old when this movie takes place. But I thought they did well. Let's keep moving through the cast.
Yeah. Mike and Tony's best friend who drives them everywhere is Cynthia, played by Marissa Ribisi. And when I was a kid coming up, where I watched everything, her brother, Giovanni Ribisi, was everywhere. You needed a really professional child actor. Boom. That got creepier and creepier, or at least played creepier and creepier roles the older he got.
People realize that guy, he had a knack for creepy. I thought he was great on Friends. There wasn't a lot that was great on Friends. He was hilarious on Friends.
It's true. Yeah. His love interest on Friends was the mom in that 70s show. They were great together.
They were really good together. They were terrific. Yeah.
My big factoid about Marissa Ribisi is she was married to Beck.
Yeah.
They have since divorced. But I remember just being like, oh yeah, way to go, Beck. Like that was I was like,
that's the right thing. And I'm sure they got divorced because Beck got weird.
Probably. And then this brings us to what I think is one of the great performances by a child actor, Wiley Wiggins as Mitch Kramer.
It's so lovable.
I fucking love this kid. And I'll tell you something, there are so many characters in this film of like all types. I identified with Wiley Wiggins. I love this kid. If he fronted a band, I would be at every concert of the Wiley Wiggins Project. What character did you identify with? Was it someone else?
No, it was absolutely Mitch. 100% Mitch.
100%.
Mitch was me so much. Like I had a vague sense of confidence somewhere down deep. I wasn't entirely afraid to say yes to intimidating situations, but the whole time I was quaking in my boots. But given the opportunity, I did okay amongst older kids and cooler kids and girls. And this kid was that in spades. There was a thing he did where he would pinch
I was going to bring up in front of the
Yeah.
Emporium. There's a thing where he repeatedly does it when he's talking to Sabrina.
He does it in several places in the movie.
It's great.
I don't know whether it's a affectation that he gave himself or maybe Linklater gave him, but it's a very real thing. You could almost see it as like, you could accidentally see it as bad acting, as like, I forgot my line, I'm thinking, but it's something a kid like that would do.
Totally, because it's somewhat akin to the fidgeting he does throughout the whole movie. He's putting his hair back. He's constantly like, he's got that kind of awkwardness because he's still growing into his body. So yeah, I just love that where he just continually touches.
His character symbolizes so much. I could see 100 kids go to see this movie. I could see 90 of them walk away saying that's the protagonist. That's who the movie's about.
Yes.
Because every step of the way, when you're Mitch, you got your friends and you're pretty happy with your friends, but the older guys are scary and yet you're somewhat jealous of them. And then one of the older guys takes you under his wing and says, "Come with us tonight." And you're like, "Yay!" And then your next thought is, "Oh no, I don't know how to."
Mm.
And then you go, and then you get in the car, and then Matthew McConaughey asks you if you've got a joint. Like one of the most famous lines in the movie.
Be a lot cooler if you
Be
did.
a
Yep.
lot cooler if you did. A line I way prefer to "They keep staying the same age." But every hurdle you make it over as Mitch, you're now in a new situation that you're not familiar with and afraid of, and you have to rise up to that occasion. And he has like several of them in one night. He does really well. And in 1970, what is it?
6.
6, Mitch can go buy beer and say, "Yes, I am over 18." As someone who was underage in the 80s, I can tell you, even in the 80s, it was pretty easy. It was
Mm.
just answer confidently when they ask if you're old enough.
Yep. Just matter of factly, you just walk in
Yep.
and do it. My friends and I think the first time we drank 40 ounces of beer, we were 13 when we started buying from the bodega. There was no such thing as carding in our
Yeah.
neighborhood. You know, my friend would constantly buy cigarettes. He smoked 2 packs a day. And we're 13 and then 14 and whatever. Ballantine's was my favorite. Like we had our brands, each of us, and and we'd even make brass monkeys out of them sometimes. You drink it down to the cone and then you put in your lemon popsicle.
Yeah.
That was how we did it in Queens. But I mean, yeah, the idea of carding or something. So like when Mitch goes in and sells it and he looks right in the guy's face and he gets a Slim Jim too, I think.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like
yeah.
perfect,
Yeah, and it's very much how it was. And that guy wouldn't have gotten in trouble. He would have been like, "I asked him, he said he was. Talk to him."
Yeah. Also, another reason that I identify so strongly with Mitch is that was very much me. I was always the youngest among my friends. They always had at least 2 years on me. And that
Mhm.
happened everywhere. My neighborhood friends, my high school friends, my college friends.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so
yeah.
I really loved seeing Mitch's kind of wish fulfillment of like how things could be. And it all starts by an off the cuff offer from Randall Pink Floyd. And he doesn't make that if he's just a quarterback who hangs out with O'Banion and Benny. He makes that because he's the guy who hangs out with Slater, who hangs out with Mike and Cynthia and Tony. And when you see Mitch on the mound, you picture a young Randy Floyd.
Mhm.
He says earlier when he's talking to Mitch, when he's recovering from getting his licks, they called me after baseball practice. Oh, it was awful. But it's like he was Mitch. He played
Yeah.
baseball. And like he probably thinks it's a power move that Mitch just like walks the length of the field. His friends get away and he just like walks. I think it's cool too. If it was me, I probably would have been like motioning to the guys like I'll meet you in the parking lot. Like just he's a badass among his friends, but he doesn't even know it yet because he hasn't grown into it fully.
I had a moment in childhood where I was probably Mitch's age, and I was walking with someone, and we saw this group of guys on the bridge that goes over the duck pond. They were smoking and like joking around and pushing each other around and just being general hooligans. And the person I was with was like, "Let's go. There's a second bridge, but it's way down." And they were like, "Let's go down to the other bridge." And I was like, "No, no, we shouldn't have to. Like, let's walk across the bridge." And he was like, "I'm going down." And I was like, "I'm going across." And I walked through the guys and I was super nervous. I probably had both hands balled in fists
Mm-hmm.
and was terrified. And one of them picked me up and threw me over the bridge and into, it was 1 or 2 feet over the duck pond.
Oh my God.
This is this is life with actual bullies.
Let me tell you a better story about yourself.
Okay.
This story you did not tell me, but this story was told to me by a mutual friend, Lara. You and her were out at some NYC establishment after a night of drinking, and you guys were sitting at a table. Some guys came in causing trouble. Somebody said some shit to Lara, and you were like, "Come on, that's not cool, guys. Don't talk to her like that." The biggest one among them was like, "Hey, buddy, you want to take it outside?" And you were like, "Sure." And then you turned to Lara and said, order me a Monte Cristo sandwich. And then you stood up and you were way bigger than the guy thought. And you walked outside and he kind of sheepishly was like, oh, come on. I was just kidding around. I'm sorry, whatever. Do you remember that?
I do. I remember the sandwich was the Austrian. It was 7A.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. I didn't know the sandwich, but I
had forgotten about that. But yeah, I do remember that. I was outside waiting for him. Yeah. And he never came.
Yeah.
And then I came back in and then he gave his like, oh, come on. I was just kidding around. And
it was just the kind of like, I'm going to be hungry when I come back.
Yeah. And I'm going to be back before it gets cold. Order me an Austrian. That was an intentional, very much an intentional move.
Of course.
Yeah.
So there's my Dave story.
Okay. That guy was like, did that guy just order a sandwich before we go up, before we step outside?
My threatening him did not kill his appetite. There's your Dave story, people.
Things did not go well for those gentlemen on the bridge. 2 of those guys are already gone from suicide.
Here's something, and listen, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Some people, it's a big loss when we lose them, and other people, we don't miss them that much.
Mm-hmm. That's a fact.
But I will say this, with people like that, do you think secretly, and not just the ones that committed suicide, but all of those bullies, do you think these people who make life difficult for other people and who clearly are going to peak in high school, do you think on some level they know it and they get all their living in then?
Oh, that's interesting. I don't know. I actually got a peek into one of these guys. I ran into one of the biggest of these dudes 5, 6, 7 years after high school. And I ran into him in a bar in Fort Lauderdale. And it was like a spring break situation. And he was like holding court. He had like women around him, and there were like dudes who were like going to get him another beer. And he had obviously started lifting weights and was all roided out. And he looked amazing. He had long wavy hair and a chiseled jaw. And I avoided him, but he spotted me. Horowitz. And I was like, oh shit. But as a lot of these guys are, now they want to be chummy. Now there's a person who knows them from their glory days and they want to be your pal.
Right.
And he's super duper nice to me. He buys me a beer. He buys me a shot. He's like putting his arm around me. And I'm like, I'm going to give this guy 5 minutes.
Right.
And then he wants to go out to the car and smoke a joint. And for some reason, I go out to the car and smoke a joint with this guy. And he starts crying while we're smoking this joint. And
I thought you were going to say, and next to the parking lot was a duck pond. Oh. And he threw me.
And I threw him in it.
Nice.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry.
No, he was extremely apologetic about how he was to me.
Wow.
And I told him, I said, listen, Timmy, I'm actually fairly tough. Like I'm capable and I'm not afraid of a lot. And largely because I was abused by you. Really.
I can't believe where you're taking us.
Yeah.
Let's get back to our comedy.
Did we get all the actors?
So Wiley Wiggins, we love his journey from where he starts out as a kid who's too shy to ask the teacher to go home early, to the end of the night where he's lying in bed and he puts his headphones on and he's just reliving how many victories he went through in one day. So amazing.
Far, it's the greatest day of his life. No question. No question.
It's the greatest day of his life so far. Yeah. But it's the greatest day for another reason, because it sets him up for so many future victories.
Yeah.
It is insane.
Yeah, and the door was open to him by an act of kindness, and hopefully he'll continue to operate that way.
He will be Pink Floyd in a few years, and he's going to pay it forward. You know he is.
Yeah.
Finally, there's one more character. Everyone else in this film is great, and even though they have smaller roles, they do a lot with it, and you can't picture anyone else in it. But the last person I'll call out, Christine Hinojosa, I believe is how you say it. She plays Sabrina, who is like in Wiley Wiggins' grade, and he talks to her at the Emporium when he continually touches the bridge of his nose. But I think she is kind of the equivalent of Wiley Wiggins, maybe, for certain young people watching this film. There's one line in this film, Dave, that I think speaks to the appeal of this film and the way it dissects high school. Jody, played by Michelle Burke, says to Sabrina when she's picking out young incoming girls to high school to go through the hazing ritual for the cheerleaders, well, are you in or are you out? And that kind of says it, because it's peer pressure on parade. She's put on the spot, and it shows that there really are only two choices. Do you want to be popular, or do you want to be one of the great out of focus
uncool
guys?
instead of unwashed? Yeah, out of focus, uncool.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so that drives Sabrina to get involved with the hazing and with going to the party. And Jody does exactly what Randy does for Wiley Wiggins. Jody is like, oh, we usually just drive around. There's a big party later. And she's like, you want to come? And they say, we'll pick you up around 7. And they actually show up.
Yeah.
Like, I've been made offers in the past by cooler people, and they didn't show up, or they forgot about me.
When Jody first speaks to her, doesn't she say, who are you? And she goes, oh, I'm nobody.
Exactly. Jody is kind of charmed by this because Jody knows that she's kind of like a kingmaker.
It's a position of power. Wipe that face off your head.
Oh, Parker
Great
Posey
line.
has some grade A trash talk in this. It's so good. My favorite physical thing is she has like ketchup bottle and a mustard bottle in each. And she just kind of like, almost like she's waving a plane in.
She does like semaphore. Yeah.
Oh, so good.
Like choreographed semaphore without getting any on herself. Like, yeah. Now, which brings us to the fact that what is she doing when she's doing that? She's spraying condiments on the girls who are laying on the ground.
She's hurling condiments and abuse on the incoming freshman class of girls and then dragging them
and then dragging them in front of men and making them say they'll do anything.
Yeah. Well, listen, here's how I look at it. It's called out in the film by Mike and Tony. It is put on blast as not being cool and being a product of its time. It could have been very easy for Richard Linklater, much in the way most of the film is just nostalgic and loving. He could have airbrushed out all the misogyny, all of the kind of like power dynamics. And
also,
instead,
I have to remind myself, it's not my high school. It's 10 years before my high school. So it's worse. Yeah,
absolutely. So he really kind of captured the time. Kept it in. Warts and all. And I respect him for that. Because you do a disservice to people that had to go through all of the bullshit of the 70s if you don't.
If I was watching it next to, what's his first name, Linklater?
Richard.
If I was watching it next to Rick, and I leaned over and I said, this is making me uncomfortable, I think he would lean back and go, it's supposed to.
Yeah. You're not supposed to.
You're not supposed to be going,
boy, those were the days.
I guarantee you some of the guys I know were watching that movie and watching those kids get their licks and going, yeah.
Yep. They peaked
those
in high
people
school.
are psychopaths. Yeah.
I love that you touched the bridge of your nose when you were trying to think of Linklater's first name.
What's his
Wiley Wiggins it out.
When you talked about like being authentic, there is an authenticity to how teenagers act in cars, how teenagers smoke pot. Teenagers are great at smoking pot. They're just fucking great at it. At one point, Randy takes a drag on a joint and then sniffs a little bit of it up his nose and then lets it out. I've seen so many joints smoked improperly in movies. I've seen so many people do a line of cocaine and then act like it exploded immediately. Their brains.
Yeah, there's great pot smoking. They get every inch of impact out of the inhales.
There's beautiful. I mean, there is stunning. I mean, literally beautiful pot smoking in this movie. It's beautiful.
Even when we first see Benny and he's working on his paddle in shop class, we see Slater is helping a kid to build a better bong. He's like, oh, you're getting air in there, man. You got to seal that up. Get some foil in there. Get a better hit.
I think gum. Get a little gum in there.
Yeah. So let's wrap this up, Dave. There are a few things I never want to think about when this film ends. And that's Darla making Sabrina's life hell for the next year. O'Banion seeking revenge on Mitch and his
I
friends
know.
all
Yeah.
next year. And an unhinged adult with a gun methodically searching the streets of Houston
For the people who wrecked his
Pickford's
mailbox.
1969 Pontiac GTO. And the judge is pretty easy to find. Yeah.
You know, Darla is there. She's drinking and maybe smoking and really wasted. I think you could almost say Darla said that to several girls that night and won't remember a lot of it.
That's the hope. Yeah.
That's the hope. Yeah. I'm really worried for the kids who dumped the paint.
Yeah.
Those kids are in trouble. That could end poorly.
That could escalate. Likewise, Clint. Clint is not the kind of guy to like, I don't see him buying Mike a beer and being like, you showed real balls. He's not that way.
No. He's really
just going to be in his car in front of the school every time Mike is coming out. But it is a credit to Richard Linklater that when the film ends and Mitch is in total bliss and the car is headed into
also
Houston, total bliss to buy tickets to Aerosmith, and Slow Ride by Foghat comes up. It is victorious and you're left with nothing but a good feeling.
Absolutely. Yeah. And as far as O'Banion, I saw a brief interview with Affleck and he said, he was like shaking his head. He's like, man, in a movie full of really likable characters, I am incredibly unlikable. And then somebody says like off camera or something like, you're pretty charismatic. He's like, I am unlikable.
Yeah, he's very unlikable.
Yeah,
I hate him in this. And his car, how great is it? His car has that. I'm going to eventually give it that last coat of paint.
That was all of my people's cars. You would have thought our favorite color was primer.
We talked about that during Breaking Away. We talked about the cars.
Yeah. There were two colors. There was the light gray primer and the dark gray primer.
Yeah.
Depending on what color you were planning on painting it.
Yeah.
And then the Bondo color over the wheel wells and stuff.
And Affleck's car, if it's not exactly the Breaking Away model, it's close. It's a muscle car. It's classic shape. You know, we've been singing the praises of a lot of high school movies. And I avoided this film for a few years because I was in college when this came out. And a bunch of kids that were in the theater department that I was involved in went to see it. And I didn't like these kids. They were pretentious and full of themselves. And they came back in quoting dialogue and singing the praises of the film. And so I'm like, oh, well, it must be a film for assholes. And I avoided it. I saw it a few years later, and I could not believe that I denied myself a few years of knowing this movie, because it is one of my favorite movies to spend time with.
It's a really easy thing to misportray or poorly portray the lives of young people. It's so much easier to get it wrong. It's incredibly hard to get it right. I'll bring it up again, down to how one smokes a joint. There were so many things where I just thought, just three kids walking down the street and one kid throws a bottle up over his head and it's going to break behind them. And
you
they
got to
know
run.
that the sound of breaking glass is something that brings adults. So while the bottle is still in the air, one of the kids says, you asshole. And they all three of them start running.
Yeah.
There's no question. That kid was like, this is getting boring.
Yeah. Yeah. And you need constant action for kids. It reminded me of so many stupid things that kids do. Like there's a scene in Friday where Chris Tucker's character is walking and Ice Cube's character comes up behind him and kicks the back of his heel, almost tripping him. And and while he does it, he goes, remember this? Like they did that as I remember doing that. It was like the most brilliant thing in the world at the time.
We used to give flats. You would step on the back of the person's shoe, and they would
come out of the shoe
step
sometimes.
out of their shoe. Yeah. And then
but
some kid would be like, "I know a kid whose tendon broke."
Yeah.
My cousin knows a kid. He doesn't know a kid.
I'll say this too about things that usually get it wrong. I love the 70s. I loved being in them. I love movies from the 70s, and I love movies set in the 70s. And it's so easy when you're setting a movie in the 70s to let the wardrobe and the hair do all the work. Linklater doesn't do that. He lets it be the backdrop. He uses it to create a very specific world. And that's why it resonates, and that's why it's nostalgic, and that's why it works.
he lets it do even less than the backdrop. All of those young ladies are wearing 70s shoes. I saw a photo on the internet where all the actresses are showing off their 70s shoes, just sticking their feet out. Like, look at my shoes. Look at the shoes he gave me. Look at the shoes he gave me. Very
Earth shoes or hush puppies.
it's like a from Fava to,
Yeah.
the whole gambit. And he gave all of them those shoes and shot none of them.
But they know they're wearing them.
Yeah, exactly. It's that thing. I think that's like a Tarantino. You have things in your pockets.
Mm-hmm.
You have matches and a lighter and cigarettes and of the time.
Right.
And it worked. It worked really well.
It really did. And Richard Linklater is one of those guys. You may know him from the, Before trilogy. He's got Before Sunrise, Before Sunset, Before Midnight. Or you could know him from School of Rock or A Scanner Darkly or Slacker. He's one of those great directors that can do a lot of different things. And I think he's one of those guys that gets bored easily. You wouldn't know it's the same guy who did all these things. School of Rock and A Scanner Darkly.
That was that like animated Philip K. Dick?
Exactly, like a really weirdly animated one.
Mm-hmm.
But if you haven't seen Dazed and Confused, I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised. It holds up better than a lot of movies from the 90s. And maybe part of that is because it's set in the 70s. I don't know.
It just keeps coming back to it, man. The 70s. It's
So
just
great.
this sweet pocket. It's sort of like things are uglier before it, things are uglier after it.
Yeah.
And it's a nice pocket. And you and I are so goddamn lucky to have existed. I feel like we were a little young to fully enjoy it, but we were very lucky to be in the pocket where we were.
Yeah, no, my childhood was the better for growing up in the 70s. I'll say this, the 70s I still look at as a magical time. It still had enough of the hard-won victories of the 60s holding over it, but it didn't yet have the crass mercenary aspects of the 80s. So it was really this time where I think people almost got it right, especially coming out of Watergate. It could have been so easy to build a better system.
I think you just uncovered what's so great about the 70s. It was just before it all went wrong.
Yeah. And then the 80s came along and the powers that be were like, no, what we got to do is tighten up the screws.
That's what I'm talking about, man.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Martha Washington was waiting for him at home with a packed bowl.
With a big fat bowl. Oh.
Yeah.
Slater-san. Oh, hang on. This is one tagline for Dazed and Confused. Are you ready?
Oh, yes.
See it with a bud.
I don't like it.
I don't like it either. And I get what they were going for. A bud can be a friend. A bud can be
or
a Budweiser.
Pot, right.
Or a bud can be, pot.
But just barely.
But it's not a pot. It's like one pot leaf.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you're forcing it. It's a forced metaphor. It's a forced metaphor. Yeah, no good.
Yeah. Can we come up with a better one for Dazed and Confused?
I wish, we got to ask this question the day before we shoot.
Yeah, that's true.
The day before we record. Can we come up with a better one for
oh my God. What about this? Hi, ... school.
Pretty good.
Off the cuff, that's not bad.
That's not bad. That's not bad. Linklater might have said, I don't want to draw so much attention to the pot.
Yeah, but then you leave it in the hands of the studio.
Yeah. How about Dazed and Confused? That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I'd give it to Slater for sure.
He's so lovable. He's lovable.
He's so lovable.
He's almost as lovable as Mitch.
Almost. And in closing, if we haven't talked about the music to this film, that's just because it's wall-to-wall 70s music and it's all great. And you don't need us to tell you that Aerosmith's Sweet Emotion or Slow Ride by Foghat is great.
Opens with Sweet Emotion, closes with Foghat. And if you only had that to work from, you could probably guess everything in the middle.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Also, I will call out one song. There's a magical moment that's almost like the slow-mo movement when like the guys in Swingers walk into like the Formosa or something. or the Reservoir Dogs guys walk down the street. It's iconic. Matthew McConaughey and his pals walk into the Emporium. Bob Dylan, Hurricane, is playing the
Oh
Ballad
yeah,
of
it is
Hurricane.
Hurricane. That's right.
It is such a great moment, but it's wall-to-wall music. It's easier to say what songs aren't used in Dazed and Confused.
Yeah.
All right, pal. Good work. I will see you next time at the Beer Bust out at the Moon Tower.
Full kegs. Full kegs? What does that mean?
Full kegs.
Well, of course, they're full kegs. Half full kegs?
Yeah, we're buying full ones this time. We learned.
What the hell?
Hollis and Dave would like to thank you for enjoying Pop Culture Graveyard.